sourdough. Welcome back to Lynn's Kitchen. Although I've been baking for, oh gosh, probably over 40 years maybe, well, professionally 25 anyway, bread has never been something that I have really tried my hand at, apart from sort of wheaten bread and soda bread. But my friend's daughter let me have some sourdough starter in return for a couple of cauliflower plants and Brussels sprout plants that I was growing in the garden. And I have tried a loaf at the weekend and it is absolutely delicious. So I wanted to just show you the process of making sourdough. At a later stage I'll show you how to make the starter or the leaven, but at this stage I'll just show you what I've had to do. So I was given a little jar of leaven, which I then have to feed 4 hours before I start making the bread. So this is mine, and 4 hours ago I added 100 grams of warm tepid water and 100 grams of strong bread flour, mixed it all up together, and I've let it sit. And as you can see, look at all the lovely gas bubbles that are developing inside that jam jar. And I use about half of that in the bread, and then the rest goes back into the fridge until you need to make again, and you repeat the process. So as well as that, then I have got 650 grams of strong bread flour. Not the easiest thing to get, I have to say. I've tried in the supermarkets and it's not easy to get, but you can get it online. And I am tempted now, if this bread making keeps going as well as it did yesterday, I am tempted to send away and get a 16 kilo bag of strong bread flour. And then I've also added 20 grams of salt. And then I've got 400 mils of tepid water. So I'm just going to add them into my bowl. That's into my mixing bowl. Now you can do it by hand, but I just added it all into my mixing bowl. That's the water, and I'm just going to weigh out then 200 grams of the starter. Oops. Let's see what we can do with this. Let's try again, and hopefully I haven't knocked it out. It has a slightly sort of sour, obviously like sourdough, you can smell the sourness, so I'm going to add 200, just weigh out 200, which is about half of it. Go. And then, as I say, the rest goes into the fridge again till you need it. So this is the starter, and as you can see, look at all the lovely air bubbles, and that's what will help make the bread. It'll give the gas to develop the bread, and that'll give you the lovely little holes that you get throughout sourdough, and the flavour is what's developed sort of while it's sitting in the jar for the 4 hours. So you can see, look, you can see the air bubbles. So I'm just going to add that in to my bowl. Turn on the mixer, and you just want it all to combine. Oh, it would help if I had it plugged in, wouldn't it? Bear with me one moment. Not much use if you've got no electricity to it. Let's try again. Right, here we go. So you just let that all mix together, rough. It doesn't have to be too exact. And then this is going to sit for 3 to 4 hours, and every hour or so you want to bring the dough together again, and I'll show you that. You fold it over. This is not a quick way of making bread, it really isn't. It's the sort of thing that you could do while you're at home all day, but the end result is absolutely fabulous. So I'm doing all this preparation now, but actually won't be baking this loaf until tomorrow morning. But it really is a lovely bread and worth the effort. So let's just want to combine. As you can see, there's still a bit of flour around the edges, so we're just bringing all that together. That's looking pretty good. So that's all you do there. I'm just going to lift this up here and just show you. So, I mean, it's just roughly formed into a dough. And I'm just going to leave that in the bowl with a cloth over it for about an hour, and then I will sort of, you fold it over itself, and you need to do that at least 3 times before you would sort of do the next stage. So you can also use just off warm oven. I mean, really the lowest setting in your oven to help it prove. But my kitchen's relatively warm at the minute, so I will just let it sit at room temperature and to develop. So I'll come back to you now in about 45 minutes to an hour and just show you the next stage. So welcome back. I have got my sourdough that has been sitting for an hour at room temperature, and as you can see, it's starting to produce some gluten, which is what you want to form a really nice bread. And this is the first time that I'm going into the bowl, and I'm just going around the edge and I'm folding the bread dough over itself. Just bringing it right round and folding it over itself. As you can see, sorry, the bowl keeps moving, but just really working it round. And then you just let it sit for another hour, and you repeat the process, and you do it again for another hour. And that's just allowing the gluten to develop, and the flavour also starts to develop, although you're going to have it sitting in the fridge overnight, so it really gets a lot of time to develop. So just a few wee sort of thick bits that are kind of rubbing through a wee bit more, but it's lovely elastic dough. And I'm just going to do one more fold over, and I think that's us for this one. And I'll leave that for another hour, and I'll come back to you then. So the dough's been sitting for another hour, and as you can see, it gets quite a sort of shiny shininess, slightly a dampness almost to the top of the dough. So again, you're just going to go round the mixture, and I can feel a wee bit of heat in it. I'm just going to go round the mixture and bring it, fold it over itself. So just scoop the dough up and over, up and over, up and over, till you've gone right round the bowl. And then you leave it to sit for another hour. So there you go. So it's all been folded over once again, and I'll show you what it looks like in an hour's time. Okay, this is the dough after another hour, and I'm going to give it its third folding over. As you can see, it's got a lovely shiny surface again, and it's looking nice and glossy. As I told you, this is not a quick process. It does require you to be about sort of, I mean, you can get on with things during the day, but it does require you to be about and just pop over to it every now and again and give it the bit of TLC that it requires. So I'm just going to put the camera down and just give it its last folding. It does feel lovely and soft. It does feel a little bit cold, I must admit, but there's not a lot of heat left in my kitchen at this stage. So you could put it in your oven, as I mentioned earlier, at very, very low temperature and let it have another hour. But I think probably, just if you can have a look and hold up the dough. and have a look and see how the gluten has developed, and it's developing nicely. So I think probably that is nearly all the time that it needs. So I'll put it down again, just give it one more last turn over. The next stage then is to turn your dough over onto your floured work surface. So I'm just going to get it all out of the bowl. There we go. Just put a little bit of flour over the top of it, and then you just want to keep bringing the corners over. So the idea is to make a nice ball with all the folds sort of tucked nicely in. So I'm just literally going to go round and round and round, pulling a corner over, pushing it into the center, pulling it out and into the center, out and into the center. And again, this is developing the gluten in the bread. So again, out and into the center. And you can feel it stiffening up. If your hands get sticky, just rub them in the flour. Although I have to say it's not sticky once you get working at it. And you keep doing that just for a little while. I can feel air bubbles in it developing. So when you have a nice smooth, stiff dough and it's formed like a circle like that, so you've got a nice shaped dough like that. So it's nice and shaped, and you can see it's nice and smooth and soft, it bounces back. That's when you want to then put it into the bowl that you're going to keep it in the fridge overnight in. So I've just got a bowl here. I've put a tea towel into it, and then just sprinkle the tea towel with some flour. Now some of you might have sort of the moulding, bread making moulds and stuff. You don't have to have them, but if you do, then it's the same principle. And you want to put your dough ball in with all the sort of folds at the top, and then that just sort of forms into the bowl like that. Then you just cover it over lightly, and that goes into the fridge until the morning, and then in the morning we can bake it. So I'm just going to put that in the fridge now, and I'll come back to you in the morning when I'm going to bake the bread. Good morning and welcome back to the sourdough bread production. This sourdough, as you know, was put in the fridge last night, and it has just stayed there all night, wrapped up, and I'm now going to bake it. It's the next morning, and as you can see, the dough has risen up in the bowl. It's lovely and soft as well. Sort of like almost like a little bit of a skin has developed on it. It's all very fascinating, and you can actually see where you know that there's going to be some air bubbles in your loaf. So the next thing to do is actually to turn this onto some greaseproof paper, and then we're going to put it into this Dutch oven. Now, I was reading up about making sourdough, and they suggest baking it in a Dutch oven. Now, this is just an old cast iron casserole dish that I have. As you can see, very old. I don't even have a knob on the top of the lid anymore. But what you do is you heat your oven up right to as hot as it goes. Mine goes to about 220 with the cast iron pot in the oven, so that metal is really, really piping, and that gives your bread a good start whenever you put it into the oven. Now, you don't have to do this. You can just bake them on a baking tray, but this gave me a really good shaped loaf, nice crust on the loaf, and this is the way I'm going to do it again, and then I'll probably experiment as time goes on with different ways of baking the bread. So I'm just going to prop up the camera here so that I can get the bread out of the bowl. So there you go, I've just put it into the Dutch oven, so the greaseproof paper is just in around it. That makes it a lot easier to get out of the casserole dish, and then I'm just going to slice it with a very sharp knife, and this lets the gas come out later on. A razor blade is great if you have one. I don't yet, but it might be something I get. So you can score them and give them, you know, you can see the sourdoughs with the lovely designs on them. So this then gets the lid put on it. So I have to be very careful because obviously I've got no knob to lift it on. And then goes into the oven. I have to put you down because I can't do this with one hand. Bear with you. So just put that straight into the oven, and that's going to be in there for 35 minutes, but I've also turned down the oven to just 200 and 35 minutes on the timer. It then comes out of the casserole and onto a baking tray, where you then just give it another 10 minutes or so to form a nice crispy crust. Reading up on it last night, I think you can put some water in the bottom of your oven as well, and that'll give you a really nice crunchy crust to your bread. Okay, so the loaf has baked in the oven in this big casserole dish for 35 minutes. As you can see, it's beautifully risen. I love the texture of the top, the way the flour kind of makes crackly designs in the top of it. But it now needs, obviously you can see it's very pale, so it now needs to be transferred to the baking sheet and baked then for another 10 to 15 minutes until the crust is nice and golden. So I'm going to put you down again because I really can't do this with one hand. I'm going to lift the bread out carefully because obviously it's really hot. It comes out really easily. And just move this out of the road. It is absolutely scalding. What I'm also going to do, so I'm going to put this into the oven, still at 200. But I'm also going to put in some boiling water that's going to create some steam. So I've just got a boiled kettle. As you can see, look at all that steam. I'm just going to put that in the oven with the bread as well. And I'll come back to you in 15 minutes and see what it looks like. So this is the loaf. Look at it. Isn't it absolutely gorgeous? Even if I say so myself. It's got a lovely crust on it. I just love this floury kind of texture on the top of it, and then the slashes. If I had a sharper like Stanley knife or a razor blade, you can get the, you know, much more regular slits up the side, but I just love the natural sort of cuts in it. Oh, I'm very pleased with myself. It looks really lovely. So this is the loaf that I had made on Saturday into Sunday, and you can see the texture of it. It's lovely and open, and it's just really lovely toasted. So I'm just going to toast a wee bit of it, and I just cut the one, best to let it really cool right down, and then you can cut the loaf in half, and you could even freeze half of it and just work away with one half at a time if it lasts that long. But yeah, pleased with this sourdough as little escapade, and I'll share some of my developments as I learn to do more different breads. So far so good. See you soon.